Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. Shahnavaz, this is kind of a weird week where we really only have one game to really go off on. We usually have a few games where there's so many stories, but the Mavericks did lose in the NBA Cup knockout rounds in OKC against the Oklahoma City Thunder, 118-104. It was really a snooze fest, but it's a perfect segue to really talk about what this episode is about. And it's about PJ Washington. He's the missing link. He's the X factor, the glue guy, whatever you have, whatever you call him. He is needed so much on this team, and he comes back tomorrow against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that's much needed help from him. We'll talk about just the importance of him playing for this team, and especially when he's out, how bad the Mavs play. And then, with Najee being out tomorrow, Maxey being out tomorrow, it's just perfect time for PJ to be back, give this team a boost. So, Shahnavaz, before we even get to what this episode is about, what people are watching for right now, do you have any thoughts on the NBA Cup knockout rounds game with the Mavs and Thunder?
Yeah, I just, you said it, it highlights the importance of PJ Washington. And I think we knew it right off the bat. I mean, I put it out on Twitter and I said, this is going to be a real struggle for the Mavs because it just seemed like they could not rebound the ball at all. Mm-hmm. And PJ Washington gives you that kind of, more of an athletic ability and really is a force, not just on the defensive end, but offensive rebounds as well. I mean, and that changes the course of the game. We saw the Thunder getting, again, those long rebounds off of missed threes that PJ normally can track down. You saw, obviously, a lack in defense. You saw a little bit lower intensity level because I think PJ brings that kind of fire to the team. And you saw the Mavs trying to play a little bit more finesse basketball, if you will. And that ultimately led them to lose. Look, the Mavs, did their best to keep it close, until kind of that fourth quarter run that Oklahoma City went on. And you're going to have games like that, right? Oklahoma City did exactly what they did in the playoffs. They trapped Luka, they trapped Kyrie, they forced others to beat him. Worked last year in the playoffs. For this one game, it worked for Oklahoma City. Can they survive taking that many threes again? They averaged making 11 a game. They were up to 13 in the first half. So there's a lot of anomalies from that game, but I think that meant more to Oklahoma City than it did to the Mavericks, just because of what happened last year, because the Mavs have already beaten them this year, which I think a lot of people forget is that, that series is 1-1 now. This isn't like Oklahoma City's won every game that they've played against Dallas, So, it's one game. It's the regular season. It's December. I don't take too much stock into what it matters. Sure. Would it have been fun and cool to see the Mavs in the NBA Cup? Absolutely. But you know what? There's a blessing in disguise because now the Mavs get rest. You're getting 4 days off before you've got to go back out on the road again. And to be completely honest, the way that they're playing, I'd much rather play the Warriors than the Rockets right now.
Yeah, you brought up a good point, which has been forgotten, is the season series is 1-1. And that puts more hype and more stock, more investment on the rubber match. See who really has the edge between both teams, because you can say injuries on the Mavs. Well, not really injuries, illness. That's going around. We're still mad at you, Jimmy Butler. We are still mad at
Jimmy Butler's fault. And now he wants to be traded to the Mavs? Come on, get out of here.
Yeah, we don't need him anywhere.
We don't need you. We're good.
Around the locker room of the Mavericks right now. But, especially financially, that doesn't even make sense. But, going back to the importance of PJ, it really was shown, not only in that game, it's really shown all season. Like, the Mavs are 1-5 without PJ Washington. And you said it best, not only his defense, because they could have used him on SGA, because SGA was getting every single spot he wanted and making them. But the problem was every time, you put more emphasis on SGA, all the others were making their shots. So it was just the Thunder's night where there's nothing you could do, because every time you try to get more on SGA defensively, someone else would make a three, and they were making all their threes and
ridiculous shots too. I mean, shots that were really well defended, to be honest. I think at the beginning of the game, I was a little concerned because it looked like Dallas wasn't going to be able to contain them, but Mavericks, the Mavericks kept, they were within 10, 11, 50, even when the league got up to 20, Dallas brought it all the way back down, I think, to 2 or 3. And it's,
Yeah.
we know now 20-point leads aren't safe in the NBA any longer, but if you want to take positives from that, it's the Mavericks did play good defense. It's just Oklahoma City was hitting everything, and it's frustrating sometimes. But we've had we've seen nights like that for the Mavericks, where the Mavericks just hit everything against an opponent, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. When you're hot, you're hot. It's just one of those games, and it just happens. But when you're missing key players, Najee was limited. Obviously, you mentioned PJ didn't play, Hardy didn't play. There's a lot going on where Dallas was kind of the inferior team there, against Oklahoma City, and the Thunder took advantage of it. So hats off to them.
Yeah, but you can also say the Thunder are missing Chet. I mean, that's the big focal point of them, especially defensively, but even offensively. He does a lot of great things for that team. Yeah. I think, and that's why I just think this is going to be a true organic rivalry, because we haven't even highlighted the fact that PJ Washington is a Thunder killer inside a Mavericks uniform. I mean, so every time he plays against the Thunder, he does really well with the Mavs. But I think this is a true organic rivalry, and I'm not talking about the rivalry you see, in the last few years where just teams jawing back and forth. That's more of just like a heated competition. Like the Suns, for instance. I tweeted this, and when I tweeted this, I had a few people talk about the Booker, Luka, or just jawing back and forth. Y'all talking when y'all are up. Stuff like that. That's just the heat. That's just the result of competition. These are professional players, and they take things personally. And when you have competition like the playoffs, that heightens things. But the Mavericks also played the Thunder in the playoffs. And when I say organic rivalry, I'm talking more of like a Spurs versus Mavs. In the 2000s where you had Dirk versus Duncan, and you're seeing that with Luka and SGA, and you're seeing great teams battle. Like, they might not like each other, but it's not because they're jawing back and forth. It's just because they're trying to beat each other to be the best team in the Western Conference. And that's why I think you're starting to see that, where this could blossom into, because both teams are starting to build their cores. And that's another thing that the Suns and the Mavericks died down, is the Suns just blew up everything right after the playoffs, and the NBA kept pushing it for Rivals Week. Yeah. What even happened to that? The NBA Cup kind of threw that out the window.
Yeah, that kind of took over.
But, that's what I'm talking about. Like the Thunder and Mavs, I wish they were in the same division so you're guaranteed a certain amount of games each season. But, this is a real true rivalry where both teams are starting to build their cores that could be together at least 5-6 years. And that's where you can see that back and forth, kind of like the beginning of the Mavs versus Suns. I mean, Mavs versus Spurs.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought when you mentioned kind of an organic rivalry. I mean, you look back to when the Mavs, even the 06 finals, Mavs Heat, I mean, there was a lot of jawing back and forth with Dwayne Wade and Dirk and Shaq, and it didn't feel like, to your point, it felt like competition. That made the championship run all that more special, because it still was Dwayne Wade, right? It was like, now here's your second chance, and Dirk's fever and the trash talking from the big three. That's all good and well, and obviously it adds fuel to the fire, but there was nothing like those Spurs Mavs matchups. I mean, when push came to shove, whether it was playoffs or regular season, it was Duncan Dirk, it was Nash Parker or Kidd Parker, Finley, like, you had just insane matchups, right? How much did we hate Bruce Bowen growing up, just as Mavs fans, right? Like watching Lou Dort, Bruce Bowen. See? I mean, the similarities are so crazy, right? Tyson Chandler, Derek Lively. There's so many similarities to those early aughts rivalries that you're absolutely right. Like, that's, and it's not only that, it's also the fact that they're so close. They're 3 hours away, right? Oklahoma City's it's a short drive away. So these rivalries that you try to pluck out of thin air because of, to your point, the jawing back and forth of teams that aren't, I don't want to say local, but teams that aren't within a certain vicinity, right? Like, I feel like rivalry should be a quick drive away. Like, you want to mess with them, you can drive up there and go to that game, right?
The Spurs Rockets are doing that right now,
Spurs Rockets, right? Mavs Spurs, right? Still a quick drive, right? 4 hours, right? Depending on how fast you want to go. Easy, Dallas and Houston, right? You look at in baseball, right? The Rangers and the Astros, right? Both fan bases hate each other. Quick drive, right? If you want to get to the other stadium. That's what a rivalry is,
And it's
right?
getting that way with the Thunder.
And
The
that's
fans
exactly
going back and forth.
and that's exactly how it should be. And I didn't think about that. What you mentioned with Lou Dort and Bruce Bowen, because that's, you look at just the player comps, right? And you look at like, okay, well now you've got Shea Luka, that's your Dirk Duncan, right? You've got your Bruce Bowen, who's your Lou Dort, and your PJ Washington, who's your Sean Marion. The similarities between these two teams from the early aughts is so crazy, but that's your rivalry, right? Because it's always a close game, it's always an intense game, there's always Luka's getting pissed off at Lou Dort, and we're clamoring for fouls, and something OKC does something where the Mavericks are able to come back and make it a close game, or other way around.
Yeah,
it's beautiful to watch because it's so much fun and so entertaining. And to your point, can Phoenix really be a rival now that team is pretty much done and they've just replaced everybody with Booker and KD, and now that's it? I mean, does that really count? Like, is Devin Booker really like enemy number one, for Mavs fans now? I'm pretty sure it's Lou Dort and Shea. If you ask Mavs fans, and Shea, because of the disrespect that Luka gets from a national media perspective, right? And how they put Shea, up on this pedestal, and Lou Dort for just what he does to Luka every time he has the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and to be frank with you, I mean, I honestly consider the Clippers more of a rivalry than the Suns.
Yeah,
Just
true.
going back with the playoffs and the competition that they had in those games. And then obviously the Clippers blew their team up. See, and that's why I think about rivalries is having two teams that has at least the core together for years and going back and forth. And that's what the Mavs Spurs did in the 2000s. You at least have your top players staying, and it looks like the Thunder and the Mavs are headed that way to have their top players stay for at least 5 next years and go back and forth and have some historic battles between the two. And I think last year in the playoffs was just the beginning of that, or you could go last season with just the MVP battle, because SGA finished second. It wasn't Luka. So in the season that Luka had was historic. I mean, that should have not only because right now they're still talking Jokic as the MVP, but look where they're at in the standings, and
it's ridiculous.
And that's what and Luka was doing. Obviously, it was a little lower because Jokic, I mean, he's just doing everything because he has players out. But Luka was doing this for the whole season, last season, and that was historic. But they talked about standings, so now with Luka and the Mavs doing great in standings, and they're on their way up. You gotta treat it the same way. But that's another topic for another day. But just going back to PJ Washington, I feel like and I've said this before. I think he is, like you just mentioned it too, with Sean Marion. I think he's the Sean Marion in Dallas, not Phoenix, not
Right.
Phoenix. So just want to make that clear, because Sean Marion's a Hall of Fame player, and he was an All-Star multiple times in Phoenix. But with the Mavs, they do the same thing, and they had the same impact. Because when the Mavs didn't have Marion, their impact, especially defensively, but just from an energy standpoint that you brought up, it was missed. And that's what you're seeing. And they had similar stats too. Like PJ Washington with the Mavs, 12.1 points, 7 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1 block, 1.2 steals in 48 games. And over the course of these last 2 seasons. Arian, 11.6 points, 7 rebounds, exact same rebounds, 1.8 assists, so 0.1 off, and 0.6 blocks, and 1 steal, so 0.2 off on the steals in 361 games. So you think back all on the impact in 361 games that Sean Marion had for this team, and you see a modern day version of it in PJ. It's just it's mind blowing.
Yeah, and PJ does all the little things, right, that I think other players don't, or that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Even with respect to rebounding, I mean, it's not just getting the rebound; it's making the right tip if it's a high rebound, right? It's boxing somebody out, it's picking somebody up, on the defensive end. The floater game on the offensive end, being able to call out switches. We saw a few times in that game against Oklahoma City where it looked defensively that the Mavericks were confused on switches, when they would try to put SGA in a pick and roll. And so That's something that when PJ's on the floor rarely happens. It's very rare that you see that happen, and he takes on that challenge of of guarding the opponent's best player. And I think when you miss it, for me, it's always it's the Draymond Green effect, right? To me, it's every team needs a guy like Draymond. You need not necessarily the personality, but the type of
Yeah.
player who does the nitty gritty work, right? The guy who brings the intensity, the guy who is constantly having your teammates back, the one who's bringing the energy. That's what PJ Washington brings to the Mavericks, and it allows everyone else to kind of do what they need to do, and he does all the other, the dirty work essentially, right? And
Yeah.
we've seen it, with PJ. I mean, this year, career highs in rebounding, in blocks, in steals. He wants to make the all defensive team. I mean, he's shooting what 36% from three.
Yeah.
This season. So that's also coming up. You talked about it a couple of weeks ago that he's picking his spots where to take those threes, right? His attempts are lower, but his percentage is higher, which is great. That means you're not just jacking up shots and some of them are going in. You're choosing the right moments to take some of those key threes. If PJ's in that game, it may not have been a different outcome, right?
Sure.
Like we don't know. We don't know. But I can sure bet you that it would have been closer than, it wouldn't have gotten to 20 points. I can tell you that because PJ wouldn't have let it, and judging, just look at the numbers, 1-5 without him and 15-4 or 15-9 or 15-4 with him. What was the number you spit out in terms of the Mavericks record with PJ? I mean, just look at the splits, right? Like there's your evidence right there of how important he is to this team. And look, it's great that the Mavericks have got this rest. I mentioned it earlier to you before we jumped on the pod that I think it's a blessing in disguise that the Mavericks got 4 days off. Yes, they're going to have to go back on the road, but this travel schedule that they've been on, for the last month and a half, 2 months has just been brutal.
Crazy.
From a travel. I mean, I'll rattle off some of this since the beginning of November. I mean, they've played in Denver, in Golden State, then to Utah, then back to Dallas, then to Oklahoma City, then back to Dallas, then back to Denver, then to Miami, from Denver, to Atlanta, to Dallas. I mean, then you're talking, then they went to Portland, then they went back to Dallas, then they went to DC, then to Toronto, where, by the way, they got stuck in customs, then had to go back to Oklahoma City. Now they're going to go to California. I mean, it's a ridiculous travel schedule. The Mavericks
I'm exhausted listening.
Dude,
I'm tired.
They've played 17 games in 36 days.
That's crazy.
13 of those have been road games.
Yeah.
4 home games.
And we also got to count in a lot of those players had illnesses.
A lot of players were sick. So we saw players play extended minutes that they may not have been ready for, right?
Yeah.
And now Najee's dealing with an illness, so we're unfortunately, Mavericks are still dealing with some of the effects of all this travel. They've traveled about 16,000 miles in the last month, and the crazy thing is after the game against the Warriors, they're either going to be 12-5 or 11-6. So even with all of that, with all the injuries, with all the sickness, the illnesses, with all the travel demands, this team still has a winning record, and by a lot. This isn't like they're one game over 500. I mean, you're a good 5-6 games over 500, even with that brutal schedule, and you've only played 4 games at home in the last over a month. I mean, that's ridiculous. You haven't been in your own bed, in over a month. That's kind of crazy to think about, that this team is playing as well as they are under the circumstances that they've been.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. That's an insane type of schedule. The best part of it is some home games are going to come up here shortly, but just going back to PJ for a sec, because you talked about his impact, when he's there and the impact when he's not there. Just want to emphasize that a little more because including Ty, PJ Washington has led the Mavs 8 times in rebounding. He's led the Mavs 8 times in blocks. He's led the Mavs 5 times in steals. And then the Mavs are 12-1 when PJ scores 10 points. Most of the people are probably thinking it's just 10 points, but those are big 10 points when you have the scores on the Mavs. And then also in the defensive impact and responsibility that he has. The Mavericks are also 6-1 when he scores 15 points. The Mavs are 6-1 when he records a double-double. And they're 6-2 when he gets 10 rebounds. But just going off of that double-double, the most PJ Washington when it comes to double-doubles that he's had in his career in a season was 10, and that was in 2020, 2021. He has 7 right now,
He'll break
19
that.
games.
He'll break that easy.
Yeah, so he's on a tear this season, and not only that, it's just the career highs all across the board, and the one thing that he's not having career high is in points. And with the Charlotte Hornets, he was a scorer.
Yep.
He had the score every night. Now with the Mavericks, it's more value. Like he's doing more winning basketball where if he scores, great, it's just 10 points. But it's how he scores. Like you mentioned with the threes. Last season, you're seeing him evolve from just every time you get it on the 3-point line, just stand there. Every time you get it, shoot it. But now he's comfortable. You're seeing comfortability in his game with the Maverick scheme because sometimes he's open and he could just jack it up. But like you said, he's the quality of shots. He wants to keep the defense honest because if he just keeps shooting the shots, defenses are going to just pound Luka and Kyrie even more because they're just going to we'll make PJ beat us. No, he's dribbling off he's making dribble drives to keep them honest. Now they don't know what's going to happen because you can just say, "Oh, just let him shoot." But now when he's doing dribble drives, you don't know what's going to happen. Is he going to do a floater? Is he going to make a pass? Or is he going to do a jump shot? You don't even know what he's going to do. I think that's where you're seeing the maturity in his game is just the unpredictability.
Yeah, and you're seeing the confidence. I mean, that shot against Memphis he had, at the end of the game, the 3 that put the game away, that's a confidence shot, right? That's pure step into it. He knows it's going in. The second he got the ball, he knew it. That's pure confidence from working on your game in the offseason, putting the work in practice. You brought up a really good point. I didn't think about that, but keeping the defense on their toes. Right now, they can't trap Luke because what is PJ going to do? Right? He can then drive in and kick out to another shooter, right? Is Quentin Grimes open? Is Clay open? Is Kyrie open? Hardy, Spencer? I mean, that gives the Mavericks so much versatility to be able to, and that's why he's so important because if that's against OKC, how can you trap Luka and Kyrie then? Because who knows what, and PJ's proven it against them before. What is he going to do? They have to account for him. One of the crazy, you brought this up and it just kind of struck me was even though he's not scoring like he did in Charlotte, but all of his other career numbers are up with Dallas. It's PJ. The best thing about it is that he loves doing kind of the nitty gritty, right? Like there's a passion there, right? It feels like a sense of responsibility that I know that this is what I need to do to be successful and for this team to be successful. And the fact that he understands that responsibility and takes it and thrives on it and really holds it as like a badge of honor, I think makes him just that much better at what he does. And it seems like every game you watch, there's something he does that's like, wow, like I can't believe he did that, or wow, what a game-changing play. And it's amazing to watch, man. The fact that it's a pride being from the Dallas area and playing for your hometown team, and he embodies that so much. It's like representing your country in the World Cup. He embodies the fact he really, really takes pride in this is my hometown team. I'm going to do whatever it takes to bring another ring back to the city.
I like that. And we'll end that with that because that is a special moment in your life. I mean, it's taken for granted because a lot of people are playing in cities, let's be honest, that they don't want to be in. They might like the team. They might like the franchise. They really like the money.
Yeah.
Like, who I'm not speculating because I don't know, but Hartenstein is a good example of that. Like he's getting paid so well. He's on a contender, but does he like Oklahoma City so that's what I'm trying to say is, PJ grew up here and he loves the city.
Anthony Edwards, you really want to be playing in Minnesota?
Yeah.
I mean,
getting paid well, you're a star in the league, but he loves the franchise.
Yeah.
But as soon as the season's over, he's gone.
He's a Southern kid. He's from Georgia.
Yep. So, okay. So, Shahnavaz, I just thought of this for a final word, last word.
Put me on the spot again, aren't you?
I love putting you on the spot. Last word, because I feel like there is something that we should also highlight in this episode. I know it's PJ and it's the NBA Cup, but OMax Prosper.
OMax.
Max Prosper, the last two games, who cares? But it's impactful games in his development, because I think that's the biggest story for a guy like Omax, where you're a lock first round pick. You do go in the first round. You are determined as a project, but the potential is so high. You have the body of like a Pascal Siakam. You're like a
Mhm.
baby Pascal, and the defense is there, but the offense is so inconsistent. But if you have two good games in meaningful minutes,
Yeah,
not throwaway minutes at the end of the game where it's a blowout, but like these are meaningful minutes due to injuries. Maxi out, PJ. So when you have two good games from Omax, just what have you seen from him and what really stands out in his career growth? Just it might not matter, but it does matter in the current tense of what he's doing. So what have you seen the last two games from him?
I always say it, when you're put in that position, take advantage of your opportunity, right? We've said it with every player on this roster. We said it with Josh Green, we've said it with Jaden Hardy, we've wanted it from Omax, and he's shown it the last two games. It's a small sample size, but we're slowly starting to see the work that he's put in. For me, the biggest thing is the lack of hesitation on his jumper. I mean,
Yes.
the just step right into it. He got good open looks from three, and he stepped right into it and made some, miss some. That's fine, but I want to see. That's what, for me, and you know this. I've said it so many times. That was my big struggle with Josh Green, was the lack of confidence and the lack of just the hesitation. Right? I mean, there's a very finite window where you've got to shoot that ball, and with Omax, especially against OKC, no hesitation. He let that thing go. Stroke looks good defensively. We know what he is on defense. He can be a very, very impactful defender, and we saw that. We saw bits and pieces of that against Oklahoma City, even against Toronto as well. It's been the offensive game, right? That we've kind of been like, when is that going to come? You're starting to see strides, and I think he's gaining more confidence, and especially as poorly as Maxi's been playing, and whether it's health, whether it's confidence, whatever it is, Dallas needs somebody at that backup four spot, because
Yeah.
especially with PJ and Najee and kind of rotating them in and out, you've got to have another guy with size off the bench. You don't want to be playing Dwight Powell that those minutes either. So
Yeah.
Omax has a real chance to seize an opportunity here, and based on the last two games, I mean he's taken that by the horns, man. I mean he's looked really, really good. I've been super impressed.
Yeah, and there's a reason I didn't even mention the stats, because honestly, it doesn't even matter. Like the eye test is
Yeah,
insane. Like you just mentioned it, and that's the reason that he's staying on the floor as long as he is, because you know recently, if this would happen with the injuries and Omax was going to play meaningful minutes, it would just be just to give guys a rest. Like
yeah,
you can't play guys 48 minutes, so you have to give them a rest and then they'll come back in. You can play Luca at the four for a little bit. Like you can do other things to get over a course of a game, and he's playing the last two games where he's forcing Kid not to take him off the court. And
yeah,
I like that, because that's what we've been talking about. Like, take advantage of your opportunity. You just said it, but we've been saying it the past 2 years with multiple players, even on this roster now. Like, and Omax is one of them. Obviously, you give him grace last season. He's a rookie. But when he's in that position where he's too good for the G League, like he
yeah.
goes down there and does look like
Dominates.
Pascal.
My
Yeah,
goodness.
he's a baby Pascal when he goes to the G League. Like he's getting so many points, rebounds, steals, guarding the best player. He looks phenomenal. But that's when you have to take the next step, where you might not look like that in the NBA, but you make flashes. And he's making flashes. And the best reason, we talked about, we saw his defense. It's good for the NBA, but if you do nothing on offense, you're not going to play. And now he's doing more on offense, where even if you don't score a lot, it's not all about scoring. It's about the little things. Like you said, Josh Green. When Josh Green was playing a lot, it's because he was doing the little things. He's not a stat sheet
Right.
stuffer. You don't look at stats for Josh Green. That's how Omax should be. You got to make the little plays. You got to dive for balls. You got to make the right reads. You got to just be aggressive. You don't want players to just leave you open. You got to dribble drive like PJ does. He should study PJ. Everything that PJ does,
Yep.
OMax should try to replicate that, because if not, and they still might do it, the Mavericks are going to get a backup four. Like if it's not at trade deadline, it'll be next
Eventually.
offseason. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're going to get a backup four, because PJ cannot play 45, 48, 45, 40 minutes a night. Like you got to, it makes the team more valuable when he's playing like 25, 30. So you got to have a backup four. And I want OMax. Obviously, they still might get a backup four, even if OMax keeps this up. But I want him, and that's what we talked about. In this season, we just want to see flashes. So then next season, you can fight for a permanent rotation spot, not just when people are injured or sick. Like if you keep showing flashes like this, obviously he's going to have a bad game. It just happens in the NBA. But if you keep this up, he will show the team, I am part of your core. Not just pick up my option and see how I do. Like I'm part of your long-term plan.
And it's so funny to bring up Siakam, because I feel like Siakam was a relative unknown before a few years ago. He spent the first parts of his career kind of
In the G
middling away
League.
in the G League, and then with the Raptors. I mean, people were like, "Who is this guy?" But the similarities are crazy, because they're both 6'8", they're both 30, they both were drafted in the late 20s in their respective drafts.
Wingspan is crazy.
Wingspan is crazy. I mean, that's it. Siakam broke through in his third or fourth year with the Raptors when he won Most Improved Player, and then became the player he is now. Right?
Yeah.
We've seen his growth over the last 5 years.
Once he learned that spin move, that's what his peak went up huge.
Yeah, and even his three game, he didn't start shooting the three until a few years ago. As the NBA evolved, he evolved, and so that's what you want to see from a guy like OMax. Because to your point, the Mavs are going to get another big, right? That's kind of the only thing that they need to check off. The question is OMax, are they going to play over OMax, or is it just going to be more of a depth piece, right? If OMax can show that, hey, look,
yeah,
you don't need to go out and get a guy that can play 20 minutes a game. You need to go out and get a guy that's in case of injury, because I got this.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
That's it. If he can put together a good stretch, because of the last two games we've seen it, but we've talked about it. It's got to be consistent, right? We've got to see the consistency from him. Same thing we've said with Jaden Hardy. Why have we seen Spencer now come in more for Jaden Hardy? Because of the consistency that Spencer has shown ever since that Miami game, right? It looked like Spencer was done, and it was like it's Jaden Hardy only, and Spencer just has consistently been double digits, efficient, making the right play. If we can see that from OMax, you could bet you'll start to see Nico's trade strategy change to maybe this needs to be more of an injury replacement as opposed to a rotational piece off the bench, because OMax has taken over.
Yeah, and that just makes the Mavericks younger. It makes the Mavericks more athletic.
Yep.
It makes the Mavericks, their core gets bigger. That makes the Mavericks just overall have a vision for young players. You saw with Lively, who just clicked instantly, but he has some lapses too. But with OMax, it took some time. But if he can just have a stretch of 2 games here, good. You might have a bad game, but the next 2 games you're good. Like you got to just build consistency. So I like that you said that. And also that just points to, even though he makes some mistakes, kid knows what he's doing, because he plays players who play good.
Yeah.
And that's what the thing is. Sometimes he does love his older players like Spencer, but he still gives them reign to bounce back. And you got to kind of trust on him. Obviously, the challenges, or some ATOs, or just overall his personality, because he is a laid back, let players grow on the court instead of just micromanage. Some of those things that might not be as appealing as someone else, but he knows what he's doing. Like his track record with the Mavericks shows that. So it just shows a little wrinkle that he does know what he's doing. Obviously he's the head coach, so that's cliche to say, but he also he has a plan. And that's what it really boils down to.
Yeah, and he has the options, right? When he's got the reign, like you said, to if the trust he has in Spencer kind of dwindles, then you can throw in Jaden Hardy, right? We saw what he did with Quentin Grimes earlier in the season. We just didn't play him, and look at the run that Quentin Grimes went on, right? So he's doing something right. I mean, we're not saying he's never makes a mistake. I mean, obviously there are mistakes that sometimes are head scratching and kind of leave you wondering what's going on. But look, with this roster, I mean, you've got it's hard to make a mistake, to be honest, because you've got everyone seems to be a key contributor, and everyone seems to be playing great basketball. I mean, very rarely, even in some of the losses, Landon, it's like it doesn't seem like the Mavericks are playing poorly. It's just
Yeah.
missed opportunities, missed shots, turnovers have been a real problem in
Yes,
a lot of these
turnovers.
losses, right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the one. If you look at the trends, it's like the turnovers that then lead to just missed shots. I mean, turnovers lead to easy shots for the opponent, right? So you get down in a hole.
Yeah.
But rather than the Mavericks being blown out or the Mavericks having to claw their way back in the fourth, we've seen them put together really good second and third quarters and are right there when the fourth quarter starts, right? So it's not like some of these losses are super egregious. So that's why I'm like, I look at the Mavs record and I'm like, I don't think that really tells the whole story, like, and you look at the travel and you look at the injuries and the fact that this team is still right there in the mix at the top of the conference is something that you should actually be super encouraged by.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of great things that they're obviously trending up. We got a lot of content for just one game.
Yeah, I know, right? Look at that. That's how we roll, man.
There we go. So PJ's importance to this team. Max showing growth in his early career. And then also the Mavericks are trending up. So we just want to say thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode of the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. You see our handles. Make sure you follow us and see some of their analysis on the game and just the coverage that we share with the Mavericks. So we appreciate y'all. The YouTube is growing just like the Facebook and Twitter. So we really appreciate y'all subscribing, liking, and enjoying our content. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.